Hi there. This is a quick update on the upcoming third prequel spin-off to Game of Thrones, on Aegon's Conquest, which is still in the pitch phase and hasn't been officially greenlit yet, but active work is going on with this, that they hired writer Mattson Tomlin of the recent Robert Pattinson Batman movies, and work has been proceeding on this, and some have said to me from other channels, oh, well, that means it's stalled. It's not on a shelf waiting for a decision. Tomlin made it very clear and has reiterated, it hasn't been greenlit yet because I am still writing the pitch. I was hired to write a pitch. This goes through production phases, but it is actively progressing through the stages of this. Well, Mattson Tomlin was recently giving an interview with Entertainment Weekly on an unrelated animated project he's writing, and he briefly talked about what's going on with Aegon's Conquest, so I'm just going to read that off. In speaking to George, it became very clear. This is history. Treat it like this is what happened. Unlike the original series, I don't have thousands of pages to go off to adapt. I've got a couple hundred that I'm really focused on, and in those pages of Fire and Blood, there are a lot of clues. Crucial quote is here. It kind of turns into doing Napoleon or doing Alexander the Great, or doing some great historical figure where we know a lot about the guy. He means factually, we know where he was. We know who he conquered, what battles he fought, who lived, who died. That all becomes a plot, and then it becomes my job to go, but what did it mean thematically? How did it feel? What were the emotions when this person died and this person over there lived? We don't have the context. We don't know what anybody said. End of quote there. So that's a great attitude to go forward with this, that I don't think a lot of people got, that when you were just watching the late Game of Thrones when it got really sloppy, just for shock value, that even like the first seasons, which are based on the books, it isn't this soap opera about shocking deaths and twists. It's almost like fake historical fiction, is how George R. Martin describes it, that he's really into historical fiction, like those books about the broken kings, the later kings of France, had all sorts of problems. The entire point of historical fiction is what were the emotions of the people living through this. I mean, even something like The Last Kingdom, which doesn't have a lot of source material, you know that eventually the Saxons fight off the Danes. That's how history works. But yeah, like Ridley Scott's recent Napoleon movie, we know the basic outline of what happened, the entire point of historical fiction. Like, I don't know, Netflix's The Crown. We know what happens. It's about exploring the emotions of the people in it. Another point related that he touches on is Martin wrote Fire and Blood in order, and when he started, it was just supposed to be sidebars to the World book, The World of Ice and Fire. And he pretty much managed to finish the chapter, the sidebar chapter on the conquest itself was 10,000 words, and they barely managed to fit it in. Now keep in mind, I've said before, I think a show on the Targaryen Conquest would be like 5 seasons. Season 1 is the Conquest, Season 5 is the downfall of his son, the tyrant, Maegor the Cruel. So after that it expands and stuff. But because Martin started writing it as sidebars, the first set of chapters, first generations in Fire and Blood, are pretty straightforward. It's only later in the development, when he got to the later chapters that turned into, this can't be a sidebar, this has to be the Princess and the Queen, when he got to the Dance of the Dragons part, which is the halfway point in the book, that's when he really hit upon that there's rival historians between the Blacks and the Greens, that one historian is pro-Rhaenyra, one is pro-Alicent, and there's this really heavy, unreliable narrator element for the second half of Fire and Blood, which is what House of the Dragon is based on. So Ryan Condal has talked at length about, I have to sometimes pick one or the other, or a middle path, like episode 4 with when Rhaenyra's with Daemon in the brothel and then really goes to Criston Cole. That's like a merging of a couple of other things that were described. There were 2 rival accounts. It's like Rashomon. That you have rival sources, you have to do that. Point is, thankfully, the Aegon's Conquest show doesn't really need to do that. that it doesn't have to deal with that extra complication of there's unreliable sources, because the first half of Fire and Blood, Martin just says this is what happened in terms of this battle happened here, this guy killed this guy. But there is still, of course, the question of what were Aegon the Conqueror's emotions like? Who is he as a person? What did he think while he was doing this? Did he do it enthusiastically? Did he kill that guy reluctantly? That kind of thing. So we're not dealing with rival, unreliable sources anymore, but it's just a factual chronicle of what happened and not what were their emotions. I've talked about this before, the whole thing that some people have built up, lionized, that Aegon the Conqueror was this hard-charging alpha male guy, and the books actually say, the quote is, he was as much of an enigma to his contemporaries as to us. He was a very solitary person. His bastard half-brother, Orys Baratheon, might have been his only real friend. And I got the impression he's this brooding loner burdened by the fate of prophecy like Rhaegar Targaryen. Like book Jon Snow, like Rhaegar, that he's this... like Paul Atreides, he's burdened by the heavy prophecies that the prophetic dreams he has. Whereas everyone else in Westeros, even in popular history, just thinks of him as this prototypical warrior, every young boy waving a stick, thinking, I'm Aegon the Conqueror, that the real person wasn't like that. So it's nice how he's saying there's still the issue of, like, even a real-life history book, like, is this what Alexander the Great really... We know what he did, but what did he feel like when he was doing it? Or Napoleon or something, if you're doing a thing. The whole point of historical fiction is to examine the human heart in conflict with itself, as Faulkner said, as George R. R. Martin so often quotes. It's not about shocking twists, it's about the emotions of the people in it and why they did things. So this is all spot on. I'm really encouraged about this, and the point of the video is more just, yes, he is actively writing a pitch. We have to wait to see if the pitch gets greenlit. This is the very early stages. I have longer videos saying we think they might turn what I said 5 seasons. They might turn season 1 into a theatrical movie, which I think makes sense for the Conquest itself. It's action heavy, there's not that much material. It could work as a 3-hour movie, just for the sake of diversifying the franchise. Oh, and one other thing that he remarked on was that, yes, he is talking to Ryan Condal about things, picking his brain is how he put it. That, like, a year ago when they were talking about other spin-offs like Dunk and Egg, someone asked Condal in an interview, like, if this is the World of Westeros cinematic universe, who's the Kevin Feige figure? Is it you? And he said, we're in such a nascent stage, I don't know. But yeah, the other 2 spin-offs, Dunk and Egg and Tomlin, they are talking to Ryan Condal.